What's going on, YouTube? This is Rybo at the bench, and tonight I have another cut or carry knife review. Today looking at the Cold Steel Code 4. So this is an older version. This is the CTS XHP. I believe the newer versions are in S35VN maybe. And I think they had an old version in like AUS 8 or AUS 10 or something. But this is a CTS XHP, which honestly is the version that I wanted anyway. It's kind of the one I looked into, but it is. I really like CTS XHP. Besides the fact that it has a tendency to rust on me, but I really like it. So yeah, here we go. So this is in a lot of ways the antithesis of any knife that I thought that I would like. I mean, this is a really big knife, which I tend to go for smaller knives. Not to say that I don't like some larger knives, but this is a big knife. This is a kind of clip point, which has never necessarily been a blade shape that has appealed to me. This is, an aluminum handle that has no real grip or anything like that. Very, very thin, very tall knife. And it's a cold steel. And to be honest, I've kind of always avoided cold steel because I don't know. I couldn't really buy into the marketing. Didn't really get it. The knives all seemed really massive and impractical. But here we are. This is the Cold Steel Code 4. So I've had this knife for a little while. I've carried it a lot. And so I'm going to give my thoughts. So let's go ahead and do the weight check. So like I said, very thin knife, larger but thin aluminum handles, but with this huge blade, coming in at 4.1 ounces. So not too bad for the size. And unfortunately, my calipers are still broken, and I have not ordered a new set yet. So we cannot do any actual measurements, and I am not seeing a measuring tape on the bench anywhere, so we're just going to stick with comparisons to other knives. This is the Spidey Chef. This is the Paramilitary 2, and that's probably good enough for now. So you can see it's a little bit bigger, maybe than your Spidey Chef. On par-ish, a little bit bigger from the PM2, but kind of in that range. Definitely feels like a beefier knife for sure. So let's talk about things that I like about this knife. And to be honest, I like a lot of things. This knife has really surprised me. So for starters, I mentioned CTS XHP. I really like that steel. I find it very easy to sharpen, takes a very, very good edge, and I find that the edge retention is quite nice on that. So I really like the steel choice, especially for the price. So we're talking about under $100, I think, for this knife. I don't know what the new versions are selling, but I believe that I want to say when these retailed, they were like around $100. So we're going to think in that ballpark, but that's a good steel. I currently have that on my Chaparral, I think, and I really like it. So I've really liked the steel choice for sure. Other things that I really like the blade. I mean, I found this to be an excellent cutter or slicer. I've cut a fair amount of cardboard with this, and it tracks super, super well. Very nice hollow grind, fairly thin to be such a large knife. Very, very nice edge grind. I really like the blade. The clip point is actually really, really nice with this nice clip right there. This nice swedge going towards the tip. Just aesthetically, I think a really, really nice knife. You can see it's got a sharpening choil there. It's got a good amount of belly, which I always really appreciate on a knife. And just all in all, I think it looks really, really nice, and it functions very, very well. I've really put this knife through some cutting tests, and I think it's done very, very well. Other things that I like, so I really like the handle materials as well. I mean, for starters, you know me, right? A green knife is going to sell me every time. So I think the color is fantastic and is a perfect shade. Just Rybo's green meter, well done, cold steel. But the aluminum handles I actually really like. For not being grippy at all, for being very, very smooth, I lock in on this knife. There's some nice jimping up here, which is not overly done. I don't think it needs to carry through to that lock bar. But that's, I think, the only jimping on the knife, really. But regardless, I really lock in on this. I have no issues. It's partially due probably to these finger choils here. The fact that it's a taller handle just really, really gets you a good grip on this knife, and I don't have any issues. And even, more so, a lot of the times that I'll lose grip on a knife is when I'm pulling it out of the pocket or trying to open it. Again, because this knife is so large, I really can brace all the way across the knife and just easily open it. I don't have any issues at all. Any issues, huh? Okay. So the handle materials, looks, everything, I'm a big fan of. Other things that I like, so the triad lock, while I don't, have all of the information in history, I do understand in principle what the triad lock is, both from looking at this knife and reading a little bit about it, but essentially it's a back lock, but more strong. You can read about the extra piece in here that gives it that strength, and you can see where that locks in right there up against here. So you've got those two pieces locking right up against that pin. Makes for a very strong lock. Now, functionally, is that going to really matter to me? For what I'm using a knife for, absolutely not. It could be a straight back lock. I don't care. But it is cool to have a little bit of a different lock design to actually own a triad lock. It's a cool little thing. And so while functionally it may not really make a difference to me, I like it. And I like back locks a lot anyway. So I think this is nice. Locking system I think is fantastic. Ergonomics, I should have probably mentioned this along with the handle materials, but the ergonomics on this knife are really, really fantastic. I mean, you have a combination, so it's a very thin handle material here, but you have a very wide handle, and you also have these nice finger choils here, which means this knife does not feel like, say, the Chaparral does in my hands, where it's very, very thin, and I'm kind of wrapping around to get a good grip. This feels really, really phenomenal in my hands. I mean, it feels like it was custom tailored for me. Just lock in really, really tight. I think it feels very comfortable. A little bit of a hot spot where that pocket clip is, for me at least, but I really, really like that. And so the handles, the ergos, all of that, just really, really nice. Finally, this knife carries very well for being such a large knife. You have this kind of curved pocket clip, which is a little bit odd, and it really tends to, although it's a larger knife, it tends to tuck the knife up away against the side of the pocket, which is nice. You're not going to really rub anything. If you have the room in the pocket to fit this knife, it's not really going to bother you. It's so thin. I really don't have any issues carrying this knife in the pocket. A little bit big for maybe like shorts pocket for the summertime, but definitely doable. So yeah, and the pocket clip is okay. It's fine. Nothing really special about it. It's fine. So, things that I don't like about this knife. So, I don't know. I don't think there's many things. I would probably redesign the pocket clip. That's just me personally. I would probably want a longer, straighter clip so that you could reverse this either way without having a separate clip. So this knife comes with two different clips. I would probably just have a straight clip that comes down maybe a little bit further. You could probably do something better than this, and that way you could have it be reversible. The back lock is a little bit stiff, and really not on the deploy or on the lockup. Like, that feels great. But when I go to take this knife down, and I push here, I have to really shake it, and it's not super easy. It's kind of like pre-Spyderco back lock break-in time. But this is a little bit worse because you push down the knife and you can't disengage it. You have to really mash this down. That's a common problem with backlocks. Just finding that perfect tension of being able to easily push the backlock to disengage it. But this one's a little bit too force. This one requires a little bit too much pressure, I think, on that backlock to disengage it. And the only other thing and probably honestly the thing that probably frustrates me the most, the only other issue, that I have is this little area right here. So I love the jimping here. But you have a blade that does not meet the handles here. And so you have this ramp that's coming up and then cuts down. And so it's not a smooth transition from the handle to the blade. And that does not necessarily have to be an issue, but for me at least, it's a huge issue because where I grab the knife and I have wider hands, I have a little bit larger hands. Where I naturally want to brace is right on that hump. So that to me feels that to me feels very natural. That to me does not feel very good because you can see I'm coming down right on that hump. So they really need to transition from here to the spine of the blade. Coming back here, this feels a little bit awkward to me, like I'm kind of backing up, which is not very intuitive. I would like to be right there. And so if I had really one thing I would change about this knife, it is clipping that right there and just doing a smooth transition down into the spine. And that way you could accommodate a lot of different hand sizes. You could accommodate if you want to choke up, or if you want to hold the knife back here like this, or even if you wanted to choke up like this. And use a grip like that, you can't really do that because of that. That's just incredibly uncomfortable. So that is probably my biggest nitpick. But honestly, besides that, and you can see that I'm apparently just out here sweating in the garage, which I am because it's the Carolinas, and that's what happens. But besides that, this knife has blown me away. I really, really like this knife. I think it's a very, very good value. It kind of hits a void in my collection for a tall knife that kind of acts like a small knife. A big knife that kind of acts like a small knife. Like this is so thin, and there's just something, I don't know, there's just something about it that I kind of want to grab this knife very, very often. That blade is just, I think, just a good looking blade. Does a lot of things. I don't worry about beating this up. This knife has really kind of put me onto cold steel, put me onto larger knives. Cold steel, I have some issues there, but it's definitely made me reconsider the brand as a whole. I mean, this is a really, really good knife. I really like this knife. So this is definitely a carry for me. This is a member of the collection now. And this is one that I grab quite often. So I definitely recommend this knife. Love this steel. I think the S35VN is fantastic as well, so you can't really go wrong there. And probably even better because I think the corrosion resistance is a lot better than XHP. So there you go. This is a carry for me, and I'll see you next time.